Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania with a special guest tonight, someone that I haven't chatted with in a while. I almost didn't recognize him. It's been so long since we chatted. It's Tim Flack, who had an article appeared on Biz News talking about this situation at OR Tambo. And there's been a lot of hyperbole, a lot of misdirection, a lot of finger knuckle clenching and teeth gnashing about what's happening, the inhumane treatment and this and that and the other, and they're refugees seeking asylum. Well, refugees don't seek asylum. Asylum seekers asylum, and refugees are a legal distinction. So a lot going on with Palestinians who rocked up at Joburg at OR Tambo and spent at least 9 hours trapped on the plane in inhumane conditions. We're going to talk about it with Tim Flack and find out his analysis of it. We'll also give you a link to the story after this. I didn't get a chance to put it up because I was live a few minutes ago. We'll put it up. But Tim, let's talk about it. First off, greetings. Good to see you again.
Cool. How's it? It's good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So, hey, let's talk about this. So first off, your article is very detailed, and it talks about how a story has been crafted to fit a political narrative, and it reminds me of the refugee program, South African refugee program, in which government officials and the media put quotation marks around refugees, even though the people who come to America as refugees from South Africa meet the legal definition under the Immigration Nationality Act of 1980, as well as the international norms for refugee. But that doesn't sit well with the political narrative in South Africa. This is another situation where a political narrative was pushed in the opposite direction. Can you give us a little insight and tell us how you got on this story and where all this information came from in your analysis?
So basically, I picked up a Twitter post actually from one of the local Gazan journalist accounts. Well, there's a lot of journalists in Gaza, it seems. But what the guy was talking about was he showed the video initially, and this was before it actually went wild and sort of went viral all over South Africa. And he mentioned that this plane of people had landed in South Africa, and I initially thought that this might have been a bit of a far-fetched story, because if you look at the interior of the plane, that's a domestic flights plane. It wasn't an international flight. It looked like one of the lift flights between Joburg and Durban or whatever. And I didn't think it would be a thing that people could fly from Israel all the way through on something like that. I initially did a bit of investigation and found out it was actually true. The initial videos were quite dramatic, and the woman giving her heartfelt plea about entering South Africa. So I dug a little bit, and when it was confirmed that this airplane had landed, I kind of watched how things progressed through the day, and obviously, Gift of the Givers, the humanitarian aid organization, jumped on it. Ever opportunistic. It's something that they seem to do. They like to insert themselves, which is fine. They do a lot of good in South Africa and around the world. But you can expect that would be the Palestinians are their main cause, so that's where they would jump in. And then this narrative of ethnic cleansing started being pushed through, and genocide and all this sort of stuff started coming through. And then it came out that the passports weren't stamped. And I immediately called BS on that, because anyone who's been to Israel knows that when you go in, you don't get your passport stamped. And when you leave, you don't get your passport stamped either. They give you a slip of paper or a card. It kind of looks something. Well, it looks exactly like this. It's got it's got all the details on it, and it's for the specific purpose of if you go to countries that aren't very friendly to Israel, that it's not stamped in your passport, so you don't get turned around.
Well, in fact, Tim, let me interrupt you for a second, because I can attest to this personally, because as a military officer, we had to carry multiple passports, official or diplomatic passports, because if you had entered Israel, Jordan would not let you enter the country, Egypt would not let you enter the country, and of course, our foreign area officers are responsible for all of the Middle East, and so they have to go to all these countries, and so they had to carry multiple passports. So that's a situation where, I have friends, and also my situation, where they had a tourist passport that was their own. They had two diplomatic passports, one so they could get in and out of Israel, the other to go everywhere else. And then they also had an official passport. So they were carrying 4 passports at a time. So I can attest to that. That's exactly right. Israel gives you a slip of paper because they know that the bigots and racists and anti-Semites don't want you going to their countries if you visited Israel.
That's 100% correct. And this narrative was sort of being crafted by Imtiaz Suleiman himself. He was the first to come out with it, this passport stamping story that they weren't stamping. And I thought this was a little bit odd, because, if you show that little piece of paper, any South African coming back from Israel gets through customs, no problem. There's no issues or anything like that. I kept watching the story, and then I started seeing this narrative being crafted of ethnic cleansing and someone through human trafficking and all that sort of stuff. And there was this shady organization that was involved that was being thrown around. And I spent some time, and I tracked down a few Gazan accounts, and one account came through onto social media that the guy, he sort of posted people who know Arabic know that when people write in Arabic, it's poetic when you translate it in your head, or when you translate it to English, it comes across as very poetic and sort of how they speak. And this guy was literally lamenting his best friend who he sat in the south of Gaza with in Rafah, and he said to him, "Where are you, my dear? Yesterday we were together, and now you're gone. And now today I see that you're in South Africa. What happened to you? I try and phone you and you ignore me. Damn you to hell," sort of thing. And the comments that came through it were people giving information about what had happened. And as I kept reading and finding out, this narrative of, well, it turns out you can get out of Gaza, and there's a legitimate humanitarian route out of it.
A corridor.
Out of Gaza, there's a corridor that's been created, and it turns out in conjunction with the Israeli government. The Israeli government is sticking to the Sharm el-Sheikh's agreement that they had with the US and with the 20 other countries that signed it, to create safe passage for Gazans who want to leave, who choose to leave. And it turns out what happens is you go to a specific hospital and you ask for a T guy who knows another guy, and then you pay a sum of money between $1,700 and $2,000. Your name gets put on a list, you get vetted, you get checked. 10 days later, you get called in, and the arrangements are made, and they exit through Karim Shalom, and end up being transported to Ramon Airport. And from there, people have been sent from there to Turkey, and then over to Malaysia or Indonesia, or in this case, from there to Nairobi, Kenya, and then to South Africa. This idea that there was this plane flying around different African states being refused entry, and they ran out of fuel and all that sort of nonsense, it's absolute garbage. They flew directly, pretty much, it looks like, in the morning of the 13th of the 13th, and landed there on the 13th in the morning. And then a charter plane was obviously arranged with Lift Airlines. Well, Lift Airlines is a parent company. I think it's called Global Aviation. This plane left Johannesburg on the 12th, landed in Nairobi, Kenya. When they landed, they obviously debussed. They would have had to go through the airport in some way, got onto the airplane and came back. So my question is, why didn't Kenya stamp their passports? This is the other question, because the original destination might have been Israel, but they got off in Nairobi, got onto another airplane, and then flew to Johannesburg.
Well, and in fact, Tim, you're right about that. I mean, I've traveled to Africa through London and been forced to go through immigration. And while they don't stamp passports anymore, at that time they did stamp. So I have
Yes.
Heathrow stamps, but now it's all scanned, and we share that data, of course, passport systems. So that does beg the question. But Tim, I got to interrupt for a second here. You're looking at Gaza, about reporters there and such. You're obviously looking at Arabic things. So it begs the question for the audience: do you speak Arabic, or are you using a translator?
So over the last 2 years or so, I've picked up key words, so I can recognize the word Gaza, I can recognize the word Israel, I can recognize certain terminologies and things like that just by associating the shape of how the words are written, so I can pick up things. But in general, if I spot something like that, I'll copy and paste it into a very premium chat GPT and ask it for a direct translation, and it always is very good at that. But you've got to do it word by paragraph by paragraph, or sort of comment by comment, and then it paints a story for you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think it's important just to make sure we ask that question. It's a fair question to ask. I mean, if you grew up speaking Arabic and you wrote in Arabic, it would certainly, people would go, aha, we got it. But what you've done is perfectly legitimate. I just want to make sure that we were clear with the audience on that. So let's pick up the story. This plane left from Ramon Air Base, an Israeli Air Force base in the Negev, flew to Nairobi. And what's confusing me in the story, okay, so Global Airways took one of their commercial, probably a 737 would be my guess, and flew it up to Nairobi and picked them up. They transloaded from the flight that came out of Israel over to this flight. But the confusing part of the story that I saw, by the way, I didn't hear anything about this, the running out of fuel in African countries. That's all news to me. I didn't hear those rumors. But I did read multiple reports saying there were 100 on the flight initially, and then they wound up with 153 that wound up in South Africa. Did they pick up more Palestinians in Nairobi? Do we know about that?
Not so sure. I think there has been a previous flight beforehand that came to South Africa, and no one knew about it. They just got off and everything was fine. This one, the number looks to be at about let's cap it at 160. Nothing more than that. The number changes between 153 to 158, but I don't think additional passengers were picked up and brought. These were the guys that paid for their trip.
So it's probably just misreporting on the part of the media.
Yeah, that's correct.
Just like the media initially said that it was a Kenya Airways flight that landed in Joburg. That wasn't the case.
That's correct. Yeah. No, and this is the thing that's been bothering me, and what prompted me to keep investigating this is that the media has been constantly just spinning constant stories, and it seems these days if Imtiaz Suleiman speaks and says something, it's taken as gospel. Nobody bothers to check him, and Suleiman has a reputation of inserting himself into things, and he's been with the national dialogue that happened. There was a whole lot of stuff there. He often tells the president what to do, it seems, but when he speaks to the media, he's a darling in the media, and you can see that it just takes a search to see when people talk about gift of the givers, the saint of South Africa, Imtiaz Suleiman is cannot be wrong, and he can't make mistakes either. They take it as gospel.
Well, in fact, Tim, my viewers asked me a few years ago to interview him. And when I came to South Africa in 2022, I think it was, I interviewed him at Sandton. That was at the convention center. Unfortunately, a very noisy venue, and everybody was being rude. I'm in the middle of an interview, and people just walk up and interrupt our interview. I'm like, hey, back off.
I actually remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, to be fair to Gift the Givers, they do some amazing work. They're a hell of a lot better than the South African government responding to disasters in South Africa. But they also go abroad. They've done earthquake relief in the Himalayas and things like that. So they do some amazing things. But there is definitely a penchant. Anything that's Palestine, Israel is evil. Palestine is wonderful. They're all victims, and that's not the complete story here. In fact, we saw a video earlier from Sarah Oosthuizen, who's a spokesperson for Gift of Givers, and she went through a whole, Crimea River story here, talking about a genocide and talking. I mean, obviously, these people aren't victims of genocide, because if they were victims of genocide, they wouldn't have landed in South Africa. They'd be in the earth. They'd be dead.
No, exactly. And I mean, if Israel sucks at genocide, if that's the case, because they have the ability, they would have been able to flatten Gaza and turn it into a parking lot within 3 weeks, probably less than that.
Well, in fact, and that's the point I make, Tim, about this all the time. I said, if it's a genocide, there are millions of Palestinians living in Jordan. There are more than the Jordanian population. There's 500,000 living in Kuwait. There are 2 million in Gaza. There are 2 million in Judea and Samaria. And so it's clearly not an effort to wipe out them as a people. It was an effort to go after Hamas. Exactly. And unfortunately, it was a brutal war, and civilians were put in harm's way because these people would set up in mosques and hospitals and use them as operational centers and make them legitimate military targets, unfortunately.
That's correct. And I mean, if you look about Jordan, I think the last numbers I checked was about 83% of the population of Jordan is actually Palestinian or identifies as Palestinian.
Well, that's a lot higher than last time I checked, but I mean, it was at one point 60%. So maybe it's a lot. They have a lot of kids, so maybe the Jordanians are greatly outnumbered now. That's the case, but yeah, there are a lot less Palestinians in Kuwait because they betrayed the Kuwaitis and allied with the Iraqis when they invaded, and so they kicked most of them out after the Gulf War. But the Palestinians are everywhere. I mean, look, we've got one in Congress.
Yeah, that's also true. And then I mean, they did the same in Jordan too with Black September. I think did they successfully assassinate or attempt to assassinate one of the Jordanian leaders at one point? I can't remember.
They did. I don't recall whether it was successful or not, but yeah, there have been attempts there. This is a long-standing problem. That's why Jordan has always had to walk a very delicate line, because they're outnumbered by Palestinians, and they've got to be careful. And that's also why, quite frankly, I think that the current king's father was kind of, I think, drawn into conflicts against Israel that he really wasn't up for, but he didn't really have a choice. Otherwise, there would have been a revolt inside his country.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So now we've got Palestinians coming to South Africa, and I don't think this is definitely not the first batch. It's definitely not the first plane either. It has come out now that there was one in October, and we don't know how many have come since. I know South Africa waived visa requirements for Palestinians coming from Palestine and from the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and from Gaza. So we don't know how many are here. I've put in official requests to the Home Affairs Department asking them for numbers and breakdowns and stuff like that. And looks like I might have to put in a Public Access to Information Act request for that, just to get the numbers. Yeah.
So, Tim, look, to be fair, as we constantly hear from Ronnie Lamola and from Parks Tau and Fikile Mbalula and Sir Ramaphosa, South Africa is a sovereign state, and it has a right. So if they want to waive the visa requirements for Palestinians coming to South Africa, it's their prerogative. But none of these people fit that category. They came here on a flight. And here's the thing, Sarah Oosthuizen said in her statement, which she was reading, obviously, and there's nothing wrong with that. She was reading her statement, but she said that Dr. Suleiman knew about this and contacted the government before they arrived. Really? How far before they arrived? And why wasn't it done sooner? Because, I'm sorry, maybe I misspoke there. She said that they became aware of because the first flight that came on the 20th October had relatives of people on this flight. And so those relatives told the gift of the givers, we've got family coming. And why did, I know you don't know the answer here, but why did gift givers at that point not approach the government of South Africa to ensure a smooth transition of people who don't need a visa, who are transiting South Africa or coming here in a 90-day? Because that's what they have. They have a 90-day visa now. They've granted them.
That's correct.
I mean, that begs a question, because it almost sounds, I'm not accusing gift givers, but it almost sounds like this was a made-for-propaganda situation ginned up by people who knew that they were coming and didn't tell anybody, putting the government in an awkward situation, allowing this bullshit narrative to fester and spread like wildfire. Do you think I'm wrong on any of that?
And this is the case that we've often seen with the sort of pro-Palestinian activist side. They'll take any small opportunity, and we saw it from the very, very beginning of the war. From that very first Hamas rocket that did a U-turn and blew up outside in the car parking lot of the one hospital. That was turned out around into, Israel is bombing a hospital. But then it turns out that it was actually a Hamas rocket. And these sort of things just keep happening, and they've gotten into the habit of doing it. They've had pretty much a couple of decades or decades worth of time to be able to develop these strategies and develop these ways of reacting. And in a way, the Palestinians are quite similar to the South African people in how they're doing things, and we're seeing a borrowing of things from the 80s and from the 70s and 60s of what happened in the apartheid struggle, which was legitimate. I mean, there's people that are going to disagree with me, and the people that will agree with me. But I mean, apartheid was a thing, and but now they've lent it to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are starting to pull tactics that were used back then for their cause, but it's being distorted and twisted in a way that's helping them, and it's working. It's working. I mean, we've got people. You talk to anyone about Palestine, and they'll tell you, I've got family members who have said to me, "Oh, but the genocide in Palestine, Tim," and I'm like, "Is the genocide in the room with us right now?" And now we're going to start seeing ethnic cleansing being used as a buzzword. It's quite ridiculous.
So what's interesting to me, and I tie this, of course, I mean, I didn't ask for this title, but another content creator has dubbed me the king of the refugees because of my coverage of South African refugees. But I guess from my throne here in central Pennsylvania, I'll weigh in on this as the king of the refugees. But what gets me is that how the South African government dismisses the South Africans racial minorities who aren't farmers and aren't Afrikaners and aren't white. They're all that plus coloreds and Indians who are coming over. But they dismiss the refugees come over saying they're not refugees, and the media's always putting them in quotes, and they're saying they don't meet the standards for refugees, which of course is a lie. I mean, it's a flat out lie. And then on top of that, then they try to say, well, they haven't been, no one's even checked their backgrounds. And then American, leftists are like, they haven't been vetted. Well, folks, there are a lot of people who are refugee aspirants in the chat right now. I guarantee you, those who've been through interviews know that they've gone through a fine-tooth comb of your background, and they've actually asked people questions, things they completely forgot about in their life. Were you picked up in July of 1987 in this place? Like, what? So they were being vetted. Meanwhile, a plane load of what some people from gifted givers are calling refugees, and others are calling asylum seekers, and others like Oosthuizen are mixing the two terms, which are legal distinctions, in the same sentence, have no vetting whatsoever, have no documentation whatsoever, and they've been allowed to stay in South Africa and apply for asylum. It seems to me like a very hypocritical approach from the government of South Africa. Maybe I'm being too sensitive, Tim.
Well, maybe you are. You need to have that looked at a little bit. But I mean, I'll take it one step further. I've just seen an article in Daily Maverick about. Sorry, it's a swear word, but I've seen an article in the Daily Maverick mentioning that the Gauteng provincial leadership, or whoever runs it, I think it's Poxtel or whatever his name is, they've started clearing up the streets for the G20. So everyone who's homeless in Johannesburg is now being removed from where they're legally allowed to be, and now we don't worry about the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act anymore. That's now out of the window because the G20 is happening, and they're picking people up off the streets and clearing the streets out, and they've got nowhere to go. But these are local South Africans who genuinely are homeless and destitute or need help. We don't know their circumstances, and they're being sent somewhere else. Whereas Palestinians who have paid between $1,700 and $2,000 for plane tickets to exit Gaza, get in here, get put up in hotels, get first-class government treatment and stuff like that, over the South Africans that are already here, just because of the G20. It doesn't make sense. So, I mean, there's levels of hypocrisy all over.
Well, I think you're talking about not Mark Parks-Towell, he's the trade minister, but rather Panyaza Lesufi.
That's correct.
And his unconstitutional, illegal personal army there that spend all their time at Sandton City Shopping Center. Look, I mean, I was outnumbered. I walked around there for a couple hours, and there were about 80 times as many of those guys as there were people shopping. That's what they did. They just hung out there because it's a nice place to hang out. They weren't out there being traffic wardens. They were inside a mall, walking around all day long, getting paid by taxpayers to be patronage puppies. But yeah, you're talking about Panyaza Lesufi, and what about the Pi Act? I mean, this is my home. I put up this. Yeah, it's funny how the Tygerberg Raceway can be destroyed. 100 million rand investment and created jobs for hundreds of people and revenue and tax revenue, and it was a popular event to go to. Completely destroyed during the COVID scam because the DA said there's nothing we can do about it, but there was stuff that could have been done about it. And here we see a situation where you just come in like gangsters and remove people. That's what they should have done in the Western Cape.
Yeah, and they need to decide what they want to do. Do they want to follow the laws or not? And it seems it's a typical ANC thing, and it seems to be a thing that they do, and it's becoming a problem. And if they're starting to do that, well, they've done it for years, but I mean, if we're starting to see it more out in the open now, it's probably going to start getting worse. And I mean, there's a lot of people who will start looking at that refugee application status to the US and thinking that maybe it's not such a bad idea to take advantage of that and go. The other thing, I mean, that I thought it was ridiculous about this whole thing. This is a South African government problem, and we're all wonderful GNU and Kumbaya together, and we work together, DA and Action SA and all. I think Action SA is in the GNU. I don't know. Some of these things I block out of my mind, like Panyaza Lesufi, because it traumatizes my fragile little mind every day. But the GNU is good when it's all together, but now the blame is now, and you'll see with Sarah Oosthuizen's post, she places the blame squarely on the DA Minister Leon Schreiber at Home Affairs. This is a Home Affairs problem now. It's not government. It's not the South African government. It's not DIRCO for not doing their job. It's not the Palestinian Authority for not maybe letting South Africa know that these people were coming here, because the Palestinian Authority is the Palestinian Authority. They're the legitimate government of the Palestinian people. You'd think that they would say, oh, by the way, we've got 700,000 people coming from Palestine. But now that Leon Schreiber is getting blamed, but he's the DA minister. So it's easier to do that and get him fired.
Well, along those lines, you brought out something that I think no one was aware of. Certainly it wasn't public out there. And you talk about the Israeli coordination of government activities in the territories. That's COGOT. They publicly affirmed that this, and I'll read this. Actually, I'll put it on the screen for my audience so you can see this tweet that went out there. So let me put up. You won't be able to see it, Tim, but you know what it is. And I'm going to read it to the audience. COGOT, I don't know when it's published because it was 11 hours prior when this thing came up. You can tell me.
The 13th of November.
Okay, so this was like on late, probably on the 12th or early the 13th that this was that the information's from. So close to 250 Gazans in need of medical treatment and caregivers, as well as Gazans with dual citizenship, exited Gaza yesterday, November 12th. There you go. Through the Karim Shalom crossing to the Allenby Bridge crossing and the Ramon Airport. We urge countries and organizations to coordinate efforts and provide necessary support and treatment. Many have already done so. We remain committed to working with our partners in the international community to actively coordinate and support the medical evacuation of patients and caregivers. So the government of Israel publicly announced that these people had left Gaza and gone through the corridor that was set up by the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement that brought a peaceful settlement to Gaza, got them out on a medical relocation, and this has been turned into the Israeli government denied them stamps. It's genocide. This is all fiction, pure fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was well in advance too. The Israeli, I mean, you lived in Israel. You know how well the Israeli government functions. They're so efficient with how they do things. It's astounding. It doesn't make sense that all of this was just some disgusting Zionist plot to destroy lives. These people wanted to leave the Gaza Strip,
and they paid. They paid to leave.
They paid to do so. Yes, it wasn't the Israeli government covering the costs or anything like that. Because I mean, I think that would cause quite a stir in there. But I mean, between $1,700 and $2,000, it works out to about a plane ticket from Israel to South Africa anyway. It's not an unreasonable amount. But I mean, if you're desperate to get out, I mean, there's ways of getting out, and they've paid that themselves.
So the bottom line behind this, Tim, because this nonsense about, I saw, and that's why I want to interview Dr. Suleiman, where he's getting his information from, his allegation. And I wasn't going to be aggressive with him, or, I'm going to ask him fairly. I mean, he's talking about some shadow Israeli organization that's behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
When in fact, as we just mentioned here, if people interview these people, they paid to get out. And this isn't like, coming through Mexico and paying coyotes to come up across our border. This was a lot different. This is through an authorized corridor that was set up for this purpose, for Palestinians who don't want to be in Gaza. So there's nothing untoward going on here. This is a matter of public record, and it's being turned. The reason I mention this, Tim, it shows you how easily the public is deceived by emotional responses to things and pulling on the heartstrings, because that's what Ms. Oosthuizen was doing. Oh, this fully pregnant woman on the flight. We had a child that was dehydrated. Well, I wasn't in OR Tambo, but I've been through there hundreds of times. Yeah. I would be surprised if officials at OR Tambo left someone who is in labor, she's claiming she's in labor, on a plane to have the baby. It seems implausible to me. At a minimum, they would have taken her off the plane and got her medical treatment, because they have medical staff at OR Tambo, and they would have put her in a detention room. If
exactly. Well, we would have seen the baby paraded all over the cameras, and oh, look, this is my baby that is born on the plane. The poor refugees. That would have been all over the news. That would have been like the cover story of the year if that was the case. And I mean, as for this organization, you've got certain characters I hate dropping names of these people because I don't believe they deserve the airtime or anything like that. But I mean, there's one particular character. You see him everywhere, and you see him in the videos. He floats around with his beady little eyes and his glasses, all behind everyone the whole time. He's constantly there, listening with his ears flapping, trying to make himself look important. But they mentioned this organization called Al Maj Europe. And Al Maj Europe has a legitimate website. You go to the website, you can see who works there, where they're based, when they started, all that sort of stuff. And the whole process is explained there. As you go there, a pop-up comes up. You have to do a little bit of work and do the translations and things like that. But you can see they say, please be aware of scams, people pretending to be us. We won't do this. We won't ask this from you. We'll ask this from you. This is how we operate. These are the official numbers that you'll only hear from. These are the official people that you can only talk to. This organization seems to be, and yeah, sure, they're working in collaboration with the U.S. government. Not with the U.S. government, with the Israeli government. Because how else are they supposed to get out? There's a naval blockade enforced by Egypt and by Israel. You can't get out by sea. They can't go through Rafah because Egypt doesn't want Palestinian refugees going there, because if they did, they would be there. So they work with the Israeli government. The Israeli government goes according to President Trump's ceasefire plan and make sure that they have a legitimate, safe exit that isn't going to be stopped and thwarted by Hamas, because I don't think Hamas wants their people to leave. They want them there because they're useful human shields.
Well, I found the video from Mr. Osoy to be particularly nauseating after watching Israeli and Europeans and Asian women raped and shot in the head, executed on October 7th, 2023. Yep. And Americans and Thais and citizens and Nepalese from around the world, Christians, Muslims, and Jews taken and abused and kept in captivity, many of them never to come home again, babies executed, babies put in ovens. And then she is going to try to elicit sympathy for people who wanted to leave, left through a international agreement corridor, which Israel is abiding by the terms of, flew out of an airport following international standards, and then was brought into South Africa illegally, and they paid because they wanted to leave. Now, I'm not blaming those people who land in South Africa. Maybe they didn't even know that's the destination they were going to, or they were told it's a transit point, or maybe they're told where they're going. I don't know. Some of them obviously knew they're coming to South Africa because their relatives came on a previous flight on the 28th of October.
Exactly.
So some of them knew that. So I'm not necessarily going to blame them. They appear to have followed the rules as they know them. But they were definitely entering the country illegally if their intent was to come there and settle there. Now, if they want to apply for asylum, that's a different story, because South Africa doesn't require you to be in the country. Well, actually, they would be there legally. They came in a tourist visa and they could apply. But you don't even have to be in country illegally. You could be in Zimbabwe and slip across the border and then claim asylum. You have to go through a process. But America, you must be legally in the country in order to claim asylum. Yeah. But South Africa, it's not the same. So, look, I mean, her listening, the crocodile tears, my empathy is not there. These people wanted to go, and she's acting as if, people put machine guns up next to the windows and cranked up the heat and, came in with Chinese water torture or did waterboarding these people. That is not what happened. They were detained on a plane because their entry was illegal. It had to be determined what their status was, who they were, and how this plane got there. That's not unusual. That happens all over the world.
So this is the interesting thing as well. I mean, if you look at the whole situation, as a Palestinian or as a Gazan, if you want to come to South Africa, you don't need a visa. You can come in here. You declare it's like at one point I think you could just go into Israel as a South African as well. There's no visa requirements, but you've got to declare your intent when you get here. You've got to say how much money you've got, all that sort of stuff, and. From what we can see, there was also a statement that was out from Home Affairs saying that these people didn't have return tickets. So when you do get to a country, you usually have a return ticket because you're coming on holiday, or after your 90-day period is up, you've got to exit again. Mind you, they should have probably just come in through Zimbabwe and they would have been able to stay however long they wanted. Just a quick jump over Bite Bridge and dodge a couple of crocodiles and lions, and then you sort it. But I mean, their family members that got here in October had no problem.
Yeah.
So something is up on the South African government side. Something is either up with the Palestinian Authority in South Africa, because they can't say that they didn't know, because Abu Mazen, for those who don't know, I call him Abu Mazen because that's his Fatah name, but Abu Mazen is Mahmoud Abbas, and he he was part of the deal. He was there when Trump was in Egypt, and he's in the photos. It's listed on online. He knows the deal. He saw the deal. He signed the deal along with 20 other countries. They can't say the Palestinian Authority didn't know about this. So someone's playing silly buggers, and it's the South African government for sure.
Yeah, no, that's it seems to be the case. Do you have a dog or something just walk behind you there?
Yeah, it's probably my cat.
Oh, cat. Okay, I like saw a movie because your background's blurred. I'm like, I don't want a home invasion. It is South Africa. I thought I'd warn you.
Oh no! If there was someone behind me, you would have had a good show and a good clip. Podcaster uses a wireless hole puncher on home intruder during interview.
Well, as long as it's a wireless hole puncher and not a firearm, because YouTube would take my video down.
Well, the wireless hole puncher is a very useful tool. I've always got it with me.
Yeah. So, but I mean, look, what's interesting about this whole situation? Number one is that why are Palestinians coming to South Africa when there's Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt? Are you still there? And I think I lost Tim Flack. That's not a very complimentary spot for him. Let me come back here. All right, so we've lost Tim there for a second. Hopefully he'll get back here in a second. Let me see. Yeah, he's frozen up there. Hopefully he'll get back here in a second. I don't know if you can hear me. Tim, if you can hear me, we can't see you. You're frozen. Anyway, so but folks, back to what I want to say here to Tim, and hopefully he'll be back in a second. What I want to say is that what's interesting is just how easily media hype can influence public opinion and change things. So he's still not there. Let me see if I can bring him back in. Oh, he dropped off. Okay, hopefully he'll dial back in. Give him a second. I think he realized he's frozen up there, so we'll give him a chance to come back in. Yeah, so how easily people can be... There he goes. Okay.
Oh, there we go. We're back again.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I got you. So what I want to say is that what's frustrating about this situation, Tim, is just how easily the public can be manipulated by people who are powerful. Now, it's not a dig against Dr. Suleiman, but all he had to do was pick up his mobile phone and call Ronnie Lamola, and he answered, and this whole thing started stewing when if they had contacted them in advance, this probably wouldn't have been known about.
He contacted the usual suspects, and in South Africa we've got a very small clique of people. It was Naledi Pandor, now it's Zane Dango at Durko. Whenever you mention Palestine, Zane Dango pops up. He's like a little puppet that just pops up somewhere, and you said Palestine, and he's the official spokesperson for them. But the fact of the matter is, and the thing that's bothered me the most is that journalists in this country are not doing their job. As a journalist, if I say to you it's raining, you don't write a story, oh, Tim said it's raining today. No, you get off your ass, you walk outside and you get wet and see that it's raining, and they're not doing that. And it bothers me. And I mean, all it took was for me to find a few really impeccably placed sources. It didn't take much. It took a couple of messages just to get these people on. They're really good sources. They know what they're talking about, just to clear it up. And that's all that's needed. But no, Imtiaz Suleiman says something, and it's the God's gospel truth. So, yeah.
No, I got you 100%. And that's so... Interesting enough, because people, detractors and leftists, white liberals and black supremacists attack me all the time saying, what is this man's obsession with South Africa? People are historians and political scientists for all over the world, and they don't live in those places. We have Canadians that are obsessed with South Africa. We have Germans that are obsessed with South Africa. We have Thais that are obsessed with South Africa. That's the nature of the world. But what I find interesting is that I have an audience in no small measure because of the incompetence of journalists the world over today. Because a big part of what I do is I go through the news and interviews, and I refute the propaganda that's presented as news. Jan Gerber had a story the other day, and he was talking about Trump, and he said, in the ironically named Truth Social, Trump spread all these lies. Okay, well, that's already two pieces of propaganda and opinion. That's not news. And ironically named, that is not news. That's an adjective to give your opinion, and then calling him a liar, that's your opinion. So this goes on a news page, and so that's what I do. So I'm actually thankful that the journalism is dead because it gives me an opening, and it's obviously giving you an opening for the story you have published on Biz News, which is excellent.
Yeah, and I've been working in PR for many years already, since at least 2013, when I left the army, and it became increasingly aware as the years went by. If journalists who I got close to, who were really good at their craft, hadn't passed away or retired or left and gone somewhere else, the pool of credible journalism seems to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's very concerning. And I mean, the last really, really great one was Amanda Watson from The Citizen, and she passed away. And I mean, there's still Sunafenta from SABC was another one. She was a very good friend of mine when she passed away. And these are people who I would have loved to have picked up the phone to now and phone them and say, listen, I've got a scoop for you. Let's work on a story. I've got all this information. I don't want my name to be there. But now I'm having to increasingly do it more and more because there's no one out there to do it. We've got activists as journalists. Mm-hmm. We've got activists parading as journalists. And you've just got to spend a couple of hours, a couple of minutes on the DM reading what's going on there to figure that one out.
Oh, you're talking about the Daily Shipbird?
that one. If I say it, I'm going to start twitching because I mean.
Well, I mean, look. I mean, I call them out all the time. There's Cockprot 24. There's the toilet paper. there's the toilet paper of record known as the Independent Online, and then there's the Daily Shipbird. So I've been slandered and lied about in all those publications and misrepresented, and including not just them but Newsroom Africa. Newsroom Africa earlier this year. I did a video responding to Amanda Khus, who is a lecturer at Stellenbosch University, when she talked about the U.S. applying sanctions to South Africa. She said they have there's no sanctions in South Africa. There's sanctions since the end of apartheid. But she said that, and she didn't misspeak it because she said it over and over and over again. It's either she's not very smart or she's a propagandist. And so I did a video refuting that, and I said, show me the sanctions. Go to the Treasury Department. There are no sanctions. This is nonsense. And that was even before we had the tariffs imposed. Anyway, so the Newsroom Africa the next week did another story, and they referenced me and said this podcaster, Chris Wyatt, was claiming that Amanda Hose was incorrect about land tenure. I didn't even talk about land tenure. They're just making stuff up, So it's just crazy. But they all do this. So I mean, it's incredibly frustrating to see how easy the lie spreads. And how easy misinformation.
They make it even more difficult now as well, because when you do have a legitimate right of reply, there was an article written where my name was dropped in the DM whereby I was named as this self-proclaimed gun guy. I can't remember exactly what the words that they used were. They wrote about me, and then. It was because I wrote an article about a woman who was complaining she was kicked out of the Jewish Literary Festival, but she's an absolute character. Let me not go further. She's a character, and she wasn't invited, and it was the Literary Festival's right to not invite her. They don't have to have every single Jewish author there just because they're Jewish. But anyway, they wrote about something that I had written about her and said that was the reason, and implied that was the reason why she was banned. Now, that's an immediate right of reply. If I don't get that right of reply, I can go to the media ombudsman, and they can make a ruling and force them to retract it, make an apology, publish my side of the facts. I wrote to them claiming right of reply, and I was stated, well, that's not exactly what we're going to give you. And they wrote a three sort of sentence byline right at the bottom, saying Tim Flack clarified that he's been working in the firearms industry as a lobbyist for the last.
The press ombudsman doesn't exactly impress me, and the fact that it's voluntary and like IOL is no longer part of it because their feelings were hurt because they got in trouble too many times just proves that. And look at the News 24 has been sanctioned 6 times in the past several months.
Well, News 24's own press ombud guy often writes. I think it's George Claassen is his name.
That's
he
correct.
Often writes his pieces are often reflected in the columns of News 24. I mean, look, I know a lot of News 24 journalists, and the ones that I am still friends with and that I talk to on a regular basis are decent people. I can't really say names, but I mean there are some good people still left there, but they're being choked out and they're struggling. It's a problem. There's the cat again.
Now it's obvious it's a cat.
She's not allowed to do that.
Yeah, she's getting away with it because you're distracted. So what's fascinating to me is that South Africa, with I don't care what the government says, unemployment lowering recently, with real unemployment well over 40%, with gross domestic product growth, basically GDP basically below inflation and population growth. Either one, the two together are a disastrous thing for South Africa. But GDP was projected at 0.9% this year. With the hit from 30% tariffs from the U.S., it was revised down by 0.4%. So we're talking 0.5% of growth. That means there's no growth. The economy essentially is going backwards. Millions of people live in inadequate or unacceptable housing conditions already. Electricity is a problem. The roads are a problem. I mean, this is not exactly a country that should be taking in refugees or asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are different, but I mean, asylum seekers are usually one-off, not a whole plane load of people. So I mean, I mean, what is going on here? This is just odd. I mean, why would people want, I mean, I know why, but I'm asking, you know, I'm asking rhetorically, why would people want to come to South Africa to be a refugee, which they're not, or to claim asylum, unless, of course, you're fleeing from ZANU-PF. I understand why people flee to become asylum seekers. But why? Why would you come all the way from Gaza when you have all these places nearby and you landed in Kenya? Why don't you go there and become a asylum seeker?
and to a country where it's Arabic is not the main language, your culture is not really here. Although we might end up seeing that it might be a cultural enclave. We'll see little Ramallah popping up and all that sort of stuff maybe in the next 5 years. But I mean, to come to South Africa where the culture and everything is totally different. I mean, even the Muslim community in South Africa is completely different to Arabic culture in the Middle East. I mean, it's chalk and cheese. I mean, I've spent enough time there to know that it's not their culture. There's so many Arabic countries around. But I mean, you going back to what you said about the GDP, that tells me something else. I mean, part of my job and what I did for many years as a PR was I worked for the South African National Defence Union, SANDU, and we always had the number of 2% of the GDP for financing of the defense force. And if that's what's happening to the GDP, the defense force is screwed, and we're going to have a big problem.
Well, defense has been chronically underfunded. They give it 1% or less historically, and that's why the barracks are falling apart. The main transport vehicles are all falling apart. The armored vehicles are a disaster. Only one of the Gripens is operational, or two Gripens, and they have one pilot. I got that backwards. Two Gripens are operational. They have one pilot that's authorized to fly it. The Corvettes or destroyers, they're not really destroyers, whatever you want to call them, cruisers, they can only get them to sea for a short time. I was in Durban, was it last year, maybe the year before, and I saw one of them come out of port. It steamed out to port, and it kind of sailed around for about a half an hour, and then it came back. It didn't come back because of a mechanical fault. It went out. I know why they did that. Sailors get sea pay, and you have to be at sea to get sea pay. So they went out to sea, away from the shore, so they could get paid their sea pay. That's what it was all about.
Offshore allowance. It was probably just a bit of a pleasure cruise. But when I was in the Navy, I joined the Navy voluntarily. I wasn't conscripted, so I chose to join the military in South Africa. But when I joined in 15th of January 2007, I joined the Navy voluntarily. And even back then, when the corvettes were, well, the corvettes had been brought in, one of the ships, I think it was SAS, it wasn't SAS Mendi, it was one of the other, Amatola, or one of the other two. We actually used to refer to it as SAS Midas, as in the spare parts car store, because whenever the other ships broke down, they'd just borrow parts from it and plug it on so that the other ship could sail. And by the time I left in 2012, none of those ships were doing so good.
Well, in fact, we call that cannibalizing in the U.S. military, and it's strictly forbidden. Now, they make exceptions of it at some point, like in combat, but normally in garrison, we can't cannibalize because you wind up with an unoperational fleet because one mechanic will take the carburetor off this vehicle, another will take the muffler off this one, the other will take the and suddenly you got three broken vehicles instead of one. But I mean, that in fact is what's happened to some of the Gripens. They've had to cannibalize because they don't have the money to buy parts from the Swedes who manufacture the Gripens. Of course, that goes back to the arms deal. We're still waiting for the prosecution of Jacob Zuma, which will never happen. I mean, he'll be dead and buried before they ever get around to prosecuting him. It's just crazy. But let's get back to the topic at hand here. I mean, this is pretty crazy what's happened here. The first flight came in and nobody knew about it. I mean, it didn't make a big deal. I mean, I remember somebody mentioning something about Palestinians coming in a plane, but I couldn't find any sources to confirm it, so I didn't go with the story because I wasn't in South Africa. I couldn't go run it down. But now this one has made a big stink, and I think there's going to be repercussions from this.
Well, in South Africa, it's a proverb that it's not a story unless you get caught, and I think it was known about these Palestinians coming to South Africa, and I think that it was done on the quiet so that no one would cause a scene. Because I mean, we're leading up to the G20. Well, the G. What are we at? The G13 now. I think it's Mexico.
We're close. I mean, I've already done my video. It's the rapidly sinking magical summit. So we've lost the U.S. We've lost Mexico, Russia, China, and now Japan may not be coming as well. So I'm calling it the G14.5 because South Africa is a demi country at this stage.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to punch above their weight. But I mean, so yeah, it's because it's the G20 now and all that sort of stuff. They wanted to try and keep it quiet. And unfortunately, as Palestinians, as we've seen, certain Palestinians, I mean, not generalize, certain Palestinians we've seen tend to be quite animated in how they do things for effect. Pallywood has been quite successful, so. It can't be a certain kind of Palestinian and go somewhere and then not cause a scene. So they needed their scene, and that's what they've got now.
Well, I think you're talking about the Rashida Tlaibs of the world, a representative in our Congress whose parents were Palestinian, whom we allowed to come to our country to use our universities and then let them stay here. They popped out an anchor baby, and 30 years later, she's obnoxious, America-hating, Christian-hating, anti-Semite who sits in Congress, and she's got a mouth like a sewer, and that would be.
And you've got the Democratic Republic of Dearborn as well.
Well, yeah, but so to be fair in that story, that's been accelerated. But a lot of people don't realize that Arabs have long been coming to America since the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s. Yeah. But the Arabs coming here were not the lot that have come here in the last 30 years. They're not the people who couldn't get jobs, who were losing in society. The Arabs who came here came from Syria, from Lebanon primarily, and some from what is today Israel. Back then, they were the carpenters, the bakers, the lawyers, the attorneys, the doctors. They were the elite who came over, and they were overwhelmingly Christian. The Christian exodus from the Middle East started over a century ago, and a lot of it came to America. So we've had we've had people who've run for president. Ralph Nader, he's a Lebanese American, and he's an Arab. He ran for president. Most people don't even know the guy's Arab. We got Bobby Rahal, famous race car driver. Everybody thinks he's just a white dude. Rahal, Lebanese.
Yeah, and they were escaping the extended Islamic colonization that's been happening since the 7th century.
Well, I think the big colonization taking place today is in the disunited kingdom. If you've been there lately, I just came back from the Rugby World Cup, and I go to a Costco to top off the petrol station there, and there's 40 cars there, and I'm the only white dude. That's not necessarily the problem, but I realize that all of us are foreigners, not just me.
And they used to, and strangely enough, if you go to London today, there's a lot more. There are a lot more Arabs and Africans in London. And at one point, there used to be more South Africans than there were Londoners in London. Now that seems to have changed. But a friend of mine who lives in London herself sent me a meme the other day, and you know that very famous scene. I think it's from Pulp Fiction, where he looks at the other guy and he says, "How do you say quarter pounder with cheese in France?" And this one said, "How do you say quarter pounder with cheese in London?" And then at the bottom it has the Arabic words for quarter pounder with cheese in Arabic script. So I mean, it's happening. I mean, you gotta go there and experience it yourself to see. A lot of people think it's nonsense, but you've actually got to go there to see that there's a massive, rapid colonization happening. And it's
just walk down Oxford Street, the High Street. I mean, it's. I mean, I've been to Saudi Arabia. It's like walking through Riyadh. All the people wearing abayas and burqas, it's just insane. Yeah. And people are welcome to visit, and a few people welcome to settle. But when you overwhelm the culture and displace the indigenous culture, that's called colonization, and that's what we all got accused of doing all over the world. But let me go back to something about Islam specifically. We were talking about Muslims a short while ago. Specifically, Islam was introduced in South Africa with the arrival of people from Indonesia by the Dutch East India Company. That's the first, and so that culture and nature and that faith of Islam is very different than what the Arab world has. Those people came out of an amalgam of those people from the Malay Peninsula and Indonesia who came over here as slaves initially, many of them, and they're mixing with Khoi, San, and with Europeans and developed a very unique culture, a colored culture that came out of that. Now, we had Muslims come into the country later in the 19th century. A lot of Indian subcontinent people were brought over, Hindus, but also some were Muslims. And so you had a different flavor of Islam that came into KwaZulu-Natal. And then a lot of that migrated up into Gauteng. So you've got more kind of the more modern Arabic version, not Wahhabism, but sort of what you'd find in Tunisia or you'd find in Israel or you'd find in Jordan. You find that in Gauteng. And then in the Western Cape, you find a very different sort of Islam, one which I find very interesting. The people in the Western Cape,
there is a very unique form of Islam, and it's an old. Muslims have been coming to Cape Town for a very, very long time. Some of the oldest masjids the oldest masjids and mosques are in Cape Town. They're beautiful buildings. They're a very proud people. They've got a long history of working hard and being part of South Africa's fabric. They do things very differently culturally. I mean, I've obviously with the work that I've been doing, the algorithms show you things, and on TikTok, for example, I often get shown certain customary practices that are happening with Muslims in Cape Town. And if you go there and you see it's something that you haven't seen before, like a special way that they don't. I don't know if some of the viewers will notice that if you look at Islam in Turkey, they have different practices of doing things. There'll be a guy spinning in the middle of a circle, and the guys will be dancing around and moving. Some of those things are not really seen as too kosher or too halal in the religion. But in Cape Town specifically, I saw a video the other day where Arabs and Muslims from other parts of the world were strongly condemning it and calling Cape Town Muslims kuffars and saying that they're infidels and that they're blaspheming the Prophet and all sorts of stuff. So it's very, very different.
Well, someone said something here about the Palestinians being, liked or something like that. Look, not to slander a whole group of people. I mean, first off, they're just Arabs. They're Arabs. Okay, let's start with that. Not to slander a whole group of people, but much like the Salwahiri in Algeria, they're a thorn in the side of many governments around the world because they tend to wind up in places and a significant number of them become obnoxiously loud activists or pushing governments to do things, whether it's in the United States or Kuwait, and they just start deporting them there, or in Jordan. And so much like the Salwahiri, who went from a group of about 15,000 and made babies like rabbits on steroids and now have like 300,000, 400,000 of them living in Algeria. The Algerians don't want them there. They go back to the Western Sahara, which is an integral part of Morocco, which Trump recognized the last time around, and Israel's recognized, and many others. Even the African Union is not making noise about that anymore because Morocco left the AU over that issue, but they came back. So look, that's the problem with Palestinians, and that's not fair to people who are Palestinian. But as a group, they tend to be troublemakers from the perspective of many countries, particularly Arab countries, that don't want them. They look at what happened in Jordan, and the Jordanian government has to tap dance around these people. And so they don't want that in Iraq. They don't want that in Algeria. They don't want that in Morocco, and I can understand why. Morocco's already got its own challenges. The majority of the population isn't even Arabic. It's Berber, and that's something that people don't know about. Anyway, so I think that's an issue there.
No, it's the same. I mean, you look at history, it just takes a lot of people don't spend the time and learn the history. And I was very fortunate to grow up in a family where we were taught these things very, very early on. I mean, I learned about the Holocaust when I was 6 years old already. But if you go back and you just look at countries like Lebanon, the whole Hezbollah started out as a Palestinian, the PLO and all that sort of stuff were in Lebanon. The Palestinians started causing the trouble in Lebanon when there was the fighting between the Christians and the Muslims there. Jordan has the same thing. There's so many other countries that have had this problem, and people forget very quickly what the PLO did throughout the world. You've got Layla Khaled.
She hijacked a plane.
She hijacked airplanes and people were killed. I mean, you've got the Lod Airport massacre when it was still called Lod Airport. I mean, I'm aware of a man that lives in Argentina now who was his girlfriend was killed and died in his arms at that airport attack. And when South Africa wanted to rename one of the drives here after Layla Khaled, he wrote a letter to government and said, "Listen, are you guys off your rocker? I mean, this is terrible what you're doing." And she gets made out to be this hero. I'm told that she's quite ill at the moment. So think about her however you choose to. But the PLO, the PFLP, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all of them, you just go back in their history and see how they started and what they've done. I mean, what we're seeing now is very limited compared to what they used to do. And I mean, the only reason that it got quiet was because they were repelled and fought very hard. That peaceful period was fought and won very hard. And unfortunately, I think over the years, with the ideology of people relaxing and everyone trying to get along and all that sort of stuff, we ended up seeing October 7th happening because people didn't think it was going to happen. And unfortunately, it has happened, and people are being awakened to it. People have even forgotten 9/11 and what happened there. With
look who we've elected in New York City. Of course, they've forgotten 9/11. My goodness. Yeah. My goodness. Yeah, I got to address something in the chat really quickly. Somebody said something about the Latter-day Saints having more than one wife. That's not correct. That church, when it was founded, that was a fundamental theology of theirs, but that was banned over a century ago. There are rogue sects who claim to be Latter-day Saints who are not affiliated with the church that live in places like Arizona and in Utah, but what they do is illegal. So they get around it by having wives that they don't marry legally, and they just have. But it's a very small number of people, and it's not socially or culturally accepted in America. We're not into the reed dance and picking the bare-breasted 16-year-olds to be our next wife. Although that sounds pretty cool. I mean, if you can get that gig in Swaziland.
Well, I mean, with the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints. Sorry, they don't like to be called Mormons. You still got the magic underwear and the gold Bible or the gold book that no one can read. That sort of stuff. Yeah, but as far as I know, I mean, the Latter-day Saints I know in South Africa don't have multiple wives.
No, they don't. The Latter-day Saints, the Mormons don't allow that. Well, Tim, it's very kind of you to spend this hour with me. I appreciate it to help clarify what's going on. But I think that the big takeaway from this, and I think you would agree, and if you don't, let me know. The big takeaway from this is that when you hear a story, don't jump to conclusions and don't necessarily believe what you hear. Be a critical thinker. Ask some questions. My first question was, in the same sentence they're calling refugees and asylum seekers, I already know that that's not possible. They're one or the other or neither. And so that's where I started this story from that approach. The next one was like, how is it that Suleiman can pick up the phone and call Zane Dangor and the whole South African government spins on a dime? That's a lot of influence and power for someone that's not elected office. And I'm not begrudging
a lot of South Africans are very, very pissed off at that at the moment. You see on social media, they're really pissed off about that.
Yeah. So the point here of the story is that there are narratives out there, and people are pushing narratives, and you need to be a critical thinker. I think that's what we need to discuss or share here.
No, absolutely. It's very, very important, and we've seen it throughout this entire war. We've seen it with the Russian Ukraine war. A lot of the wars that people get swept up in emotionally and stuff like that. People aren't checking the facts before things happen. So really important to do that. We live in a modern age of ChatGPT, and I mean, you're not going to get confirmation bias if you copy someone's comment in a screenshot, paste it into ChatGPT and say, "Dear ChatGPT, is this true?" You don't lead it on. You just say, "Is this true? What does the history say about this?" And it'll give you links. You can go and read them. Keep going. You don't have to just take things at face value anymore.
Well, one of the viewers says Tim Flack is a giant intellect. Get him on again soon. I had no idea.
Me neither. You're gonna give me a thanks very much, but you're going to give me imposter syndrome now.
And Alana says, just want to say thank you to Tim for the very insightful article and for doing the interview, explaining further, and thank you to me for arranging it. No, it's my pleasure, Alana. Thank you for pointing out the article. Tim, I didn't see it. So Alana pointed it out in our last stream, and I'm like, we got it. We went through it. I'm like, yeah, this is, we got to talk to Tim about this. And Tim was on the road, he was, dodging carjackers, and he said, I'll be home in 5 minutes, and then he came on. So there we go. Tim, any final words on this topic before we let you depart here and enjoy your Friday evening? What's left of it there?
Yeah, not everything is as it seems, and a lot of people say. I've heard it many, many times over the years with the Defence Force and with government is surely they're not stupid enough. Yes, they are. It's been proven time and time again. Yes, absolutely, they are stupid enough, and they will do it. And yes, they probably did do it.
Well, Tim, I don't know how well if you knew Neil de Beer at all, but Neil,
oh yeah,
I saw Neil just before he passed away. And I was in South Africa this year. Neil was very emaciated from the cancer and very frail. And so we met down at Gordon's Bay. And and I said to him, I said, because this is when the South African government just kept saying stupid thing after stupid thing, insulting Trump, insulting America. And I said to him, I said, Neil, you were with them. You were one of them. You understand how they think. I'm outside the wire. I've analyzed them for decades. And I mean, I have to ask this question. Is this intentional or are they just that stupid? Neil looked at me, and I can't do the Afrikaans accent. Ronaldo can do it. But he looked at me and said, Chris, they're just that stupid. They're just that stupid. I was like, oh my goodness. And he's spot on. It's really the case. People are that stupid. Now, Tim, I'm not going to put you in the spot here but someone's like, Tuesdays with Tim. I think they're angling to have you on the program occasionally.
Tuesdays with Tim. Wow. Okay, cool. Oh, we can definitely, I mean, we can talk about it and plan it up. Maybe not every Tuesday.
Exactly. It's already, Ronaldo already sucks up my Wednesday, so I can't do every day.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, I'd be happy to come on and we can chat again. But I'm actually quite touched that the audience wants to hear more from me. So that's quite nice. Thanks.
Well, Tim, it's not one people. I would have ignored one person, but it's an overwhelming number of people keep saying it. So anyway, Tim Flack, thank you. Bye donkey. Kealoboa, thanks for coming to the program for your insights. And I will put the link to your article and hopefully get some traffic over there after I finish the video. All right. Thanks, Tim.
Cool. Thanks so much. Lekker aan julle. Bye-bye.
All right, so Tim's going to drop off there, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We got that on short notice. Really appreciate my guest coming on, Tim Flack. Tim and I haven't talked in ages, so this is a great opportunity for me to chat with Tim again. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for your interest. We'll look at doing a segment, kind of like we did the Bribe Brews Tuesdays with Tim or something like that. We'll think about that, okay? And we'll do it again, maybe occasionally. We'll keep it to an hour or something like that, maybe once a month or something like that. Thank you for your insights, Tim Flack, and thank you, the audience, for your comments. Folks, you need to be a critical thinker. What have I said all along? Don't take things at face value. Don't take what I say at face value. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to believe me. I mean, I appreciate that you trust me. I'm honest with you. My favorite South African phrase is, if I'm honest, which I always respond, why would you be anything else? Why would you be anything else except honest? Anyway, Marilyn, good to see you again. How's Lindsay doing? All right, guys. Yassine, good to see you there. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for being here. And unless there's another breaking story, this will do it for me until later tonight for Night Owls, which will be Saturday morning for y'all in South Africa, but it'll still be here Friday. And don't forget, tomorrow on Rugby Ascent, we got 3 games coming up. Springboks, live play-by-play and color commentary right here on, well, not here, but on Rugby Ascent, followed by England hosting the All Blacks, hoping the All Blacks lose, even though I picked the All Blacks to win in that game. And then it's Ireland versus Australia. And so back-to-back. Well, not quite. The last one, there's a couple hours breaks in between. But 3 games tomorrow. All right, folks. Take care of yourself. And once again, thanks for being here. Cheers, everybody. Really do appreciate your support. Bye-bye. Hit the like button. Only 376 likes. Oh, come on. You guys can do better than that. 3,000 people here. That was easy. That's only 10%. We can do better than that. There's 454 people here right now. That's another 70 people that haven't hit the like button. Quit being freeloaders. Hit the like button. Cheers, everybody. Thanks a lot.